Hi, my name is Ainsley Adams, and I'm the Director of Fine Arts at South Piedmont Community College. I wanted to make this video, it's kind of a second part to the first video I created was how to edit your 2D art. So if you would like to see that, please check out that video. This one here, I'm going to focus on how to edit your 3D artwork. So it's a little different. We're going to be following a lot of the same steps, but I wanted to make sure to do a focus on that for any of you who are in a 3D class or who maybe make a 3D artwork even in one of your 2D classes. So the first thing I want to just highlight is this website. This is GIMP.org. This stands for GNU Image Manipulation Program. And this is a free and open source image editor. It works very much like Photoshop. It really does. It's, has a little bit of differences, of course, from Photoshop, but it does all the same things that we would need to edit photos in Photoshop. So if you've never used it before, you can just go to GIMP.org. You can read a little bit about it. There's a lot of information provided, and then you can download the latest version. I've already downloaded it, so I'm just going to open up that software. And this is kind of where I left off with my last demo on the previous video of 2D art. I finished editing this photo. So if you want to see how to edit artworks, whether they are traditional like rectangles and squares, 2D artworks, or ones that have a weird shape, like this one, you can check out that video. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about 3D editing. A lot of the steps in this video are going to be the same. I'm going to go over them again. The first thing I want to talk about is how to photograph your 3D work. Now, ideally, if you have access to it, using like a photo studio works best. This one here was taken in a photo studio, and you can see just how smooth the backdrop here is. It's because it's essentially a large sheet of paper that's been curved, so it creates like no lines. But you can kind of create a similar look using a sheet or several pieces of paper. The point is to have a non-distracting background. So you can kind of do that at home. Your 3D teacher, I'm sure, will give you some more information on that as well. But again, the most important thing is to have a non-distracting background. And again, a curve is really nice because then there's no like hard edge going through the background. Just creates a nice smooth transition. Now with 3D work, you're always going to have added challenges because not only do you have to worry about the background curve, but you also have to worry about shadows. So you're going to have cast shadows from your artwork, no matter how you light it. There's always going to be some shadowing issues. So let's start with this one first. I think this one here is one of the more complex ones to edit. Because it needs a lot of stuff done to it. So this piece here is one that was taken on a sheet with some paper, and it's obviously sideways, so that's one of the first things we'll edit, but it's also a little crooked, and then also like it needs to be adjusted and cropped. So the first thing I'm going to do is flip it. So to flip, you go to Image, Transform, and here you can flip. So for example, if you needed to flip it counterclockwise, or if you needed to flip it vertically or horizontally, you could do that. I'm going to flip it 90 degrees clockwise. So now it's right side up, which is important. Good first step. The next thing I want to fix is the perspective. Now this is tricky, and in some ways we're helped out a little bit by the fact that this paper is here. So we can use it as a guide. We're going to end up cropping probably a little bit of that off, but I'm just going to use it as a guide for this first part. I'm not going to do all four sides, but I'm just going to use that one corner to help kind of guide it a little bit. Now I'm using the perspective tool. These are the kind of toolbars over here. It looks like a little cube, and you can kind of click and drag and move that perspective around. Now with 3D art, you're maybe never going to get it quite perfect. And again, what you want is that true to the artwork. You're not trying to make it perfect, but you want to make sure you make it true to the artwork. So I want to make sure it looks like the artwork looked, not warped or weird, but as accurate to the real thing as possible. I'm going to make it a little bit like that. When you're satisfied with how it looks, and again, you don't have as clear of a guide as you do in 2D work, but when you're satisfied, hit enter. And then you're going to go to the crop tool. And this is where you're mostly going to do a huge chunk of this editing, because you don't want to see all this big sheet or big background. So what I'm going to do is crop in as close to the artwork as I can, while not cutting anything off. And I'm a little too close on this side, so I'm going to pull it over to the left a little bit. What you really want to try to do is have about the same amount of distance, eyeballed, from each little edge to the edge of the crop. Move this one up a little bit. You also sometimes want to give your artwork a little bit of maybe a taller top part to make it feel weighted to the bottom, to make it feel like it has space to breathe. When you're satisfied, you can hit enter, and that will crop your artwork. Now this already looks a lot better than it did when it had the sheet and everything showing. And especially for artwork that you're photographing at home, like this is really good, a really good case scenario here. So, this would be nothing to be ashamed about. This would be great for doing it at home. Now, I'm also going to want to adjust the levels. So to do that, I'm going to go to colors. There's a lot of different options of things you can play with here. You could adjust the brightness. I might adjust the brightness after I see how it looks once I do the levels. You can also adjust the color. So for example, if you feel like it's too bright, or too yellowy or too bluish, you could adjust that. You could also make it something black and white. I didn't show how to do that in the last video, but it's really simple. If you hit saturation, you can just desaturate it to show how to make it black and white. So levels is what we want. Now, when I adjust with levels, I always say that this little graph here is kind of really what you want to look at first and determine, once the data falls away and there's no data, we really don't need this information over here. So you want to move this first little arrow. You want to drag it until that data is present, until you actually have data. I'm going to do the same thing over here, although that doesn't need to be dragged as far. And now this middle one, you're going to drag back and forth until you feel like it looks the way it should look. So again, I said this in the last video, but your goal is never to just make it look better. Your goal is to make it look as accurate to the original as possible. So, in 3D work, that's almost a little easier, I feel like, than in 2D work, but you're looking for that medium behind, where it looks like it really looks. Nice and shadowy, good contrast, but not so far distorted and contrasty that it doesn't look like the original anymore. Right, so I'm going to kind of land somewhere about here, I think. And then when you're happy with it, hit OK. I don't think it necessarily needs anything else adjusted. You could, again, play with some of these other things if you want to see what they do. But I feel like it looks pretty good to me, so I'm not going to. Now the next step is to save it. So to save, you go to File, and here's what you don't want to do. I know it can be seems obvious, but you don't want to hit Save, because that's going to save it as a GNU Image Manipulation Program file, a GIMP file. So what we actually want is a JPEG, because if you save it as a GIMP file, the only place you'll be able to open it will be GIMP. We want something that you can save and open lots of places, like you could put on a website or you could put on Moodle. So we're going to go ahead and click Export As, and we're going to give it a name. I already named my earlier examples from the previous demo, so I'm just going to keep kind of the same format. I'm going to call this one Test 4. And then right here I'm going to go Select File Type, and then I'm going to scroll down until I get to JPEG. Now there's a bunch of different file types. You could save as a PDF, you could save as a PNG, you could save as a TIFF file. I'm going to suggest JPEG. You can even save as a Photoshop file, which I think is really cool. Although if you had Photoshop, you might just be using Photoshop for this. Then the last thing here, as you export to a JPEG, is just to check the quality. Personally, I think it's always a good idea just to bump it up to 100 because, you know, why not save it at the best quality possible? Then hit export, and that's it. You're done. It's been saved. So now when you go to close, I'm going to close this to work on another one. When you go to close, it's going to give you this little error message. It's going to say, are you sure you don't want to save your changes? Now, the thing is that this one has already been exported, but this file here, this GIMP file, hasn't been saved yet. But we don't actually need it anymore, so we can just hit discard changes. And if you're worried, we can double check to make sure that it did save our test. You can go to open, here it is right here, test 4, and we can open it. And let's keep it as the original. It's not sure. One of the nice things about this software is it's pretty smart, and it can usually tell when something's upside down or sideways. But because this piece is so abstract, it's not really sure. So we're just going to say keep original, and there it is. All right, so let's do this one together. We're going to follow all the same steps. I'm actually not going to do too much straightening here, just a little bit. So I'm going to not really use any guides, but I'm just going to kind of like pull it a little bit so we get a little bit of straightening happening to this, so that when I crop it, we have a little bit of a better ability to crop it. Now, one thing you want to be very careful of when you are doing this, again, is making sure you don't lose the quality of your artwork. You know, your artwork is not this, right? So you have to be careful not to over perspective crop or over perspective fix something. You want to make sure you're keeping it within its natural shape and size. But it is a little warped, so I'm just going to kind of go like that. And then I'm going to hit enter. If you forget to hit enter and you go straight to crop, that's totally fine because it's just going to go ahead and process it for you. Then I'm going to hit crop. In this one here, I'm just going to, make a guess, drag and drop. And same thing, I'm looking for about the same amount of space on every side. If you feel like you've got a little too much on one, you can click and drag and move. And then on the top, I like to have a little bit more breathing room at the top, so I usually make it a little bit taller. This is totally up to you, but that's just kind of my preference. I'm going to hit enter, and then I just need to fix the level. So colors, levels. Again, I'm going to drag it till I get information on both sides. And then I'm going to go up and down until I feel like I hit that point where I like it. Go about there. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to export. Export as. I'm going to rename this one. If you want to just go over this whole thing, test 5, that's totally fine because it will go ahead and put that extension at the end automatically. Then I'm going to pick my extension. This is a very important step. Find it in here. I passed it. JPEG. Hit export. Again, I'm going to make sure it's at the highest quality, and I'm going to hit export. Okay. I'm just going to do one more. This one's actually really easy. Discard. This one's really easy because I was taken in a professional art studio. So the paper, the backdrop is just really smooth, and we were able to get nice and close. The person who took this photo, I wasn't me, but they were able to get really, really nice and close on the picture. So it honestly doesn't need a ton of editing. Definitely doesn't need any perspective cropping, but I'm just going to crop it in a little bit. I think it would look nicer as a horizontal picture. And I'm going to give it a good amount of room around it to breathe. And then I'm just going to adjust the levels. Levels. And you can see it needs a lot of adjustment here. And look at how rich the quality of the colors become. And again, you're always making sure you make it look like the original. You don't want to be trying to make it look better than the original. The goal is to make it look as close to the original as possible. And hit OK. And then I just need to export. File, export as, And then I just follow the same steps, rename it and select JPEG. That's really it for today. Thank you guys so much.